Back door skill roll on the workbench. I've already gone through and cleaned up and did all the maintenance work that I wanted to do. But I wanted to go over a quick recap of what we've already done. What we mentioned in the first video, our door's upside down here, but our fuse block needs to be replaced. Over time, these tabs just get really weak and they break off. And that causes a lot of obvious connection issues, but it can also cause things to heat up too when there's a lot of resistance in those connections. So that's garbage. Put in new fuses too. The other ones were kind of charred up, probably from having those loose fuse clips on them. Went through the two units here. This is the row count. This would be the score unit. Took everything apart, cleaned all the parts with the highest percent iso alcohol I can find locally. It's a good cleaner to get rid of all that old junk and gunk from all the years of service. Everything came apart, cleaned them with alcohol, and then to reassemble and lube everything, got to go with the super lube. This was the row count unit that we had trouble getting reset, and now it's nice and freely moving. This row count unit has 9 steps to it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is the last one. Then it can't go any farther, and then it needs to do a full reset. You can also see that switch that needs to be hit by that peg upon reset. And then on the back side, again, all those contacts were cleaned and then lightly, very, very, very lightly greased with that super lube so that those spider legs can freely rotate around. It's also good to go around and double check that none of your solder connections here are broken loose. Same setup on the score unit. Took everything apart. I actually took one wind off of this return spring as well, just so it doesn't slam so hard into the home position. And again, this one has 46 steps to it. Then it'll stop, and then it's a full reset. And again, everything cleaned with iso alcohol and then relubed with super lube. And then same thing on this one too. On this particular one, you obviously have the contacts that the spider legs need to hit that you can see on the face of the disc, but there's also one down here. I can kind of point to it while holding a camera. One down here that goes on the underside of the spider leg. So when you're cleaning these up, make sure that you don't forget that one. One way that I like to clean up all the contacts, whether they're on a stepper or if they were just switches in a stack, is I'll take some Q-tips and the alcohol. I'll get it clean first, and then I'll take a rotary tool with a quote-unquote magic brush from Nick Volta on the Pinside forums. He made this Dremel attachment famous, and he calls it the magic brush. The 443. This one came in a 2-pack, so it's just a little kind of cone-shaped wire brush. And this is what they look like after you use them a few hundred times. But they still work very well. They last a long time. They do a really good job at polishing the contacts, and they're not too aggressive either, because a lot of old school guys will sand these or use emery board, and that's pretty aggressive, and it takes a lot of the material away from the switch contacts, and it also kind of leaves them rough. So I prefer this because it's a little less invasive. I think it gives a better finished product with probably less work as well. So clean it with alcohol first on your swab, do the magic brush, and then the final step, clean it with alcohol again. So all of the switches in the relay bank were done with that approach. One way that I found works well, and these are upside down again. Each relay is mounted with just 2 black screws, and you can take those out and then flip this away from the rest of the bank to kind of work on it. And in order to do that, there's one bare wire that connects all the terminals to the common lug of these coils. I removed this wire. This is one continuous wire that's just wrapped around once and then wrapped around once and keeps going. To get these loose, I remove this from each of these lugs except for this one. That way this one can come loose and they can all come independently, and then when you do that, you can get the relays cleaned up. I usually like to take loose the switch stacks as well, get in there with that polish swab technique and get those all cleaned up. And then as a final check, just make sure everything's closing and opening how it should based upon how the switches are oriented. Now, if you don't feel comfortable or you don't know what you're doing, try not to adjust anything unless you know that it's an issue. On EM games, you can quickly create more problems than you're solving just by blindly adjusting things. And when you are adjusting, especially when you get a game new to you, one thing you should always check is that these switch stack screws are tight. So when I got this game, they probably had about a half turn on all of these screws. And those get loose over time because the bakelite spacers in here will shrink over time. And on a shorter stack here, you're less likely to see that loosening because there's fewer spacers, but on a large stack, you'll probably see a lot more shrinkage, which means you'll have to tighten those screws down. And you should definitely, if you're going to adjust switches, absolutely tighten those screws before you do, because if you don't, your adjustments are going to go in and out and you'll have some really confusing results. On the score motor, again, we can do a more in-depth video of this, but they have switch contacts in there as well, so the entire switch bank can come off. It's not too daunting. There's a screw here, and then around the corner here, and there's the same thing on that side. So you can flip those switches up and do some maintenance on that. Chime box, if we get this out of the way, just went through and cleaned that up so that we could get a decent sound out of that. Same thing with the bell, just took it apart, cleaned up the plunger. Inside here there's a very small plunger that has a brass insert on one end, so make sure that the brass insert isn't worn down too much, because it's a steel plunger with brass on it. That brass is softer so that you don't crack your bell. Also went through and cleaned this normally closed slam switch, just in case that would ever give me issues down the road. And then lastly, on these female Bally connectors, be extremely careful if you think that you need to clean these. Most of the cleaning will need to be done on the male end, which is connected to the play field. But on the female side, these are very delicate and they snap easily. They're only connected kind of on that spine, and they're free on this bottom end, so they're really easy to bend out of shape, and once you bend them once or twice, they snap off completely, making that connector useless. So the way that I usually do this is I try to avoid plunging in the holes because that can bend them up or down. What I usually do is I take a small bottle brush and I'll just slip it in here. That just kind of cleans the surface where the male pin goes to the very bottom. I'm going to clean that with alcohol, and then I actually went through a second time and used some deoxit in there too to hopefully improve that connection. But again, be really careful on those. They're not replaceable with Williams and Gottlieb. They're slightly different spacing, and again, that's one of the bad things that Bally did that was unique to them. So those stupid female Jones plugs and those light sockets are a big knock on the Bally EM stuff. And I think that about covers what we did on the back door. We'll probably do another video just for the score motor later on. But hope to see you in the next video.